She stood in front of a camera on Easter Sunday, the most hopeful morning of the Christian calendar. Flowers, light, resurrection, and she said quietly, honestly in front of everyone that the promise of that morning felt irretrievably far away. That was Savannah Guthrie, one of the most recognized faces in American television news. A woman trained to deliver hard stories with composure. And for the first time in a very long time, she couldn't fully do that. Because this time, she is the story. Savannah Guthrie has co-anchored The Today Show since 2012. For over a decade, she has sat at that desk and delivered news, good news, devastating news, world-changing news with the kind of steady presence that morning television requires. She has covered elections, tragedies, pandemics, and the full spectrum of human experience. She has interviewed presidents, she has broken stories that shaped national conversation, and through all of it, she has been, at least on camera, composed. On the evening of January 31st, 2026, something happened that no amount of professional training prepares a person. Savannah Guthrie's mother, Nancy, 84 years old, was abducted from her home in Tucson, Arizona. Not missing in an ambiguous sense, not a wellness check that turned into a misunderstanding, abducted. And, as of the writing of this script, more than 2 months later, Nancy Guthrie has not been found. No suspect has been named. No arrest has been made. $1 million reward has been offered. And the silence continues. Let's look at what is actually known, because in cases like this, the verified facts matter more than speculation. Nancy Guthrie was last seen at her Tucson home on the evening of January 31st, 2026. She is 84 years old. Her daughter, Savannah, upon learning of the abduction, stepped away from her Today co-anchor duties. She offered a $1 million reward for information leading to her mother's safe return. That reward, $1 million, is not a small gesture. It reflects both Savannah's resources and her desperation. As of now, no suspect has been publicly identified. No person of interest has been named. The Tucson investigation is ongoing. What that means in practical terms is this. For over 2 months, Savannah Guthrie has woken up every single morning not knowing where her mother is, not knowing if she is safe, not knowing if she is alive. That specific kind of uncertainty, the not knowing, is something researchers who work with families of missing persons describe as one of the most psychologically devastating experiences a human being can endure. There is no funeral, there is no closure, there is no chapter that closes. There is only waiting. On April 5th, 2026, Easter Sunday, Savannah Guthrie appeared in the digital service at her church, Good Shepherd, New York. The video was shared on the church's YouTube channel. What she said was not what most people expected from a morning television anchor on the most hopeful day of the Christian year. She began warmly. She acknowledged Easter, the flowers, the pastels, the joy, the promise of resurrection. And then she shifted. She told her congregation and anyone watching that standing there that morning, she had to confess something. That there are moments, she said, when the promise of Easter feels irretrievably far away, when life itself seems far harder than death. Moments of deep disappointment with God. Feeling of utter abandonment. Those are not small words. Abandonment, disappointment with God. Coming from a woman of faith, on Easter morning while her mother is missing, she went further. She said that in her own season of trial, she had questioned whether Jesus ever truly experienced the particular wound she was feeling, the wound of not knowing, of uncertainty, of answers withheld. Read that phrase again. Answers withheld. That is someone in genuine spiritual crisis, not performing doubt for an audience, not making a theological point from a place of safety. That is a daughter who has been waiting for 2 months to find out if her mother is alive, and finding no answer and bringing that raw, unresolved grief into the holiest morning of her faith tradition. Here is what makes Savannah's message extraordinary. And I don't use that word lightly. She didn't stop at the darkness. She sat inside it long enough to say something true about it. She told her church that perhaps her message was too dark for Easter morning. And then she explained why she shared it anyway. Because, she said, we miss out on fully celebrating resurrection if we do not acknowledge the feelings of loss, pain, and death. It is the darkness, she said, that makes the morning's light so magnificent. That is not a platitude. That is not a greeting card sentiment. That is a woman who has spent 2 months in one of the worst experiences a human being can have, and who chose, on Easter morning, to be honest about it, fully honest, not the sanitized version, not the version that makes other people comfortable, the real version. And the day after that, April 6th, she returned to the Today Show. Back at the desk, back delivering the news, back in the seat she has held for over a decade. While still not knowing where her mother is, there is something that gets lost in the coverage of cases like this. The headlines focus on the crime, the reward, the investigation, the timeline. And those things matter. They are important. But behind every missing persons case is a family. And inside that family, there are people doing something extraordinarily difficult that never makes the news. They are continuing to live, they are getting up, making coffee, going to work, answering emails, talking to their children, celebrating holidays, going to church on Easter morning. Not because they have moved on, but because life does not stop moving simply because your heart has. Savannah Guthrie went on television the day after Easter and co-anchored a morning show. She smiled. She did her job. And the day before, she had stood in front of a camera and said, "I have questioned. I have wondered. I feel abandoned." Both of those things are true at the same time. That is what grief in public looks like when it is done on. And it is worth naming because we don't often. We see people perform wellness. We see composed statements and coordinated appearances. We see the version of pain that has been managed for consumption. What Savannah gave on Easter morning was something different. She gave the unmanaged version, and it was one of the most human things a public figure has shared in a very long time. Nancy Guthrie is still missing. That fact, simple, devastating, unresolved, sits at the center of this entire story. $1 million reward has not produced a named suspect. 2 months of investigation have not produced a public arrest. An 84-year-old woman abducted from her own home has not been found. The Tucson investigation continues. Federal resources may be involved, though details of the investigative process have not been fully disclosed publicly. And Savannah Guthrie continues to show up, to work, to speak, and to wait. There is an open question that no one can answer right now. What happened on the evening of January 31 in Tucson, Arizona? Who took Nancy Guthrie? Why? Where is she? These questions don't have public answers yet. And the absence of answers, in a case with this much attention, this much reward money, this much investigative pressure, raises its own quiet questions about what investigators do and don't know. Cases involving elderly victims abducted from their homes are statistically rare. When they occur, the motive and perpetrator profile vary widely. Without a named suspect, it is impossible to say more than that with any accuracy. But the not knowing, that sits. For Savannah, for her family. For everyone watching this case and hoping for a different headline, we watch morning television because it feels stable. Same desk, same faces, same music. A reliable presence in the part of the day before the world fully arrives. Savannah Guthrie has been that presence for millions of people for over a decade. And right now, she is living through something that has no stable ground, no reliable presence, no music that signals everything is going to be okay. She stood in a church on Easter morning and told the truth about that. She said the light is real, and so is the darkness. You cannot fully celebrate one without honestly acknowledging the other. That is not just a theological statement. That is a human one. If you know anything about Nancy Guthrie's appearance, anything at all, there is a $1 million reward. Tucson law enforcement is actively investigating. And if you don't, then maybe the most meaningful thing you can take from this story is what Savannah Guthrie quietly modeled on Easter morning. That it is possible to hold grief and hope at the same time. That showing up, even when you are broken, is its own kind of courage. That sometimes the most honest thing a person can say in public to strangers on the most hopeful morning of the year is simply, "I am not okay, and I am still here." Let me know what you think.